Well, I am honored to be in your company. I generally, the last 3 years, I've been in hospice and alone by choice. This gentleman has a new Corvette. I haven't worn shoes until a couple of weeks ago in over 2 years. Haven't been in a car, been deep in nature.
Where was that in
Bali. And also in Maui. And immersed, blessed is the diagnosis of immediate death if you do not do what medical industrial complex tells you to do. So I'm a miracle at the moment, walking on existential, not ice, but water. There's none of us who are exempt from discontinuity, to state something as simple as death could happen at any minute. We know that, right? But for some of us, it could happen even sooner than what you think. Next thing you know, wow, a whole new generation. I don't remember my great-grandparents at all. The big flow of anicca, of existence, the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. By way of saying, this is what drew me to Burma. I was a young man. I left the University of Virginia. I had a scholarship. I was playing football. I said enough. And I went overland to India with my partner. And I got to Bodh Gaya, the place of the Buddha's enlightenment. I heard more about the Buddha's teaching. I heard about this remarkable man in Burma, the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw, sort of the Dalai Lama, if you will, of Theravada Buddhism, deeply rooted in silent, as Victor mentioned, intensive, focused, mindful, intelligent presence. I wanted the kind of Stephen Hawking, if you will, of meditation. And he was that man. He was one of the great academics. He wrote nearly 80 books, but his focus was meditation, the study of consciousness. Now, having grown up in the East Coast at the time of the psychedelic era, I had a lot of ups and a lot of downs with psychedelics, and I wanted something that was sustainable. Meditation was that vehicle for me to enter consciousness on the most natural, organic level of presence and study the so-called experiential physics, if you will, of present time presence, the basis of meditation, right? Being now is almost cliched, right? Mahasi Sayadaw is like the scientist of what the now represents at the base level and takes it what they call higher. Point two, before I get closer to the topic of Burma's revolution. You know, very few people know that the word meditation in the original Pali Buddhist language is B-H-A-V-A-N-A, bhavana. What does that mean? The beautification of consciousness. So it's an artistry, not a kind of pandemic-driven, now time present. When I'm eating, I'm just tasting the food. It's a type of aesthetic with artistry. And Mahasi Sayadaw, who was my preceptor as a monk, I was blessed to be a monk in Burma. I was told I was one of the first Americans, one of the first Westerners. And his name, Mahasi Sayadaw, was from his village, but his monk's name was what? Usobana. What does that mean? Beautiful states of mind, teaching bhavana, beautiful states of presence. So when you hear the word mindfulness and meditation, it's so benign and so medical and so precise, almost like my mom said, Alan, anyone could be mindful, even someone who's looking like through a scope, an assassin, isn't that what you call them? And they can be precise in hitting the target, right? But really someone who's aware might go, why do I see her or him as the enemy, and put the gun down, right? So being present is, any idiot can do that. You can play golf and tennis, and no offense to those professional players, but to beautify your mind with discernment, another category altogether. Mahasi Sayadaw was the modern era, the Picasso, if you will, the Michelangelo of beautiful states of mind. Okay, just want to let that out there oh wow, this isn't like some process of just being present with what I'm doing and doing it really well. That's just basic skillfulness. Even children can do that. But to study beautiful states of mind. So Mahasi Sayadaw and his successor, U Pandita, being trained as an artist, said, Alan, look at your mind like a palette. What are the colors of consciousness that you wish to evolve, commingle, and bring to the palette of now time presence? Very different quality of meditation. So I invite you, if you want to learn meditation, write down at home, like maybe you've done this, like 4, 5, 6, 7 different qualities of mind that you consider to be the qualities of color, of inner beingness that you wish to cultivate for your whole life. Not a retreat at Hollyhock, or at Esalen, or in Burma, not a 10-day Vipassana with Goenka. No offense to any of them. Mahasi was in for the long evolutional haul of what we call Dharma artistry. And when you see the nuns and the monks and the lay people in Burma, around the entire country, one of the things that maybe those of you who've gone to Myanmar have seen is a type of simple elegance in the people, right? You can feel it in their cognitive roots, that they have style, they have swag, they're cool, they're simple in their look at you. Meditation is a way of living, not just sitting in a still posture. They disavow you of that postural apartheid, they call it. Are you with me? Okay, so that's a little bit of the meditative rave. I went to Burma, and one of the most important things that happened to me after meeting Mahasi was 2 years into my time there. There was a big fanfare, and there was a man that came out, and I saw him. He was older than I by 20, 25 years, and it turned out he was the former commander-in-chief of Burma's military. He was the general under the dictator, Ne Win, who gave me my visa to be there. He had just been released from 6 years in prison. He ordained, we became friends. He's the man 13 years later that introduced me to Aung San Suu Kyi. He was Aung San Suu Kyi's advisor, chief mentor, and co-founder of her National League for Democracy.
I just want to interrupt here. This is very unusual because in the 60s and 70s, if you want to go to Burma, all they give you is a 7-day visa. So the fact that Alan was able to get this very special visa and to be in the country for 2 years, 4 years, is an incredible privilege. I went there 2 times in the 70s, and each time they gave me a visa of 7 days. That's it for everybody.
They trusted the CIA. Thank you very much. That's what they called me, as I got thrown out so many times, that he's a faux monk who works for the CIA. And they're sort of, I wouldn't be employed by the American government under no external. I love my country, but not my government today. So, thank you for that. U Tin U, he had been 6 years in solitary confinement as the general of the army. And he was the one who said, Alan, do you realize that you live in a country ruled by tyranny and dictatorship, where anything could happen at any time, where someone could be disappeared, on and on and on. And so he introduced me to what I would call the psychology of totalitarianism and dictatorship in Burma. And it cracked my belief system wide open about Buddhism and meditation, and all of a sudden he, as a monk, as a former general, who survived 6 years of solitary through Vipassana meditation, through a book that was smuggled into him by my teacher, Sayadaw U Pandita at the time, and Mahasi Sayadaw. It was like the first interface of politics, revolution, and Dhamma, meditation. Anyway, I got thrown out of the country shortly thereafter, got thrown out 2 or 3 different times, and eventually I got back into the country underground. And in 1995, when Aung San Suu Kyi was released from her 6 years of detention after she had won the Nobel Peace Prize, I was invited through a French publisher, if I could get into the country, can you talk to her and bring her story to the world? I spoke Burmese, I knew a lot of the people. I had written a book, Burma, The Next Killing Fields, in 1990. I was part of a film by John Borman called Beyond Rangoon in 1994, 1995. A lot of history. I did Burma's Revolution of the Spirit, a photographic book with my colleague Leslie Kane. And so I said, okay, I'll give it a go. These are my family. I went in, it was U Tin U. After 6 weeks of solitary in my hotel room, he took me there and we met Aung San Suu Kyi. She had just been released. I invited her, will you tell your story to the world? And she said, on 2 conditions. If you include Uncle U Tin U, Uncle U Chi Mung, another co-founder, and you're aware that you could and I will likely be arrested at any minute. I said, a deal. And so for the next 6 months, we navigated above ground, below ground. I was in her house a lot of the time for many days and weeks and months, met her family. Like Victor knew her husband, Michael, knew her 2 sons, Kim and Alexander. They had come and gone. And I got to enter this woman's mind and heart in her home, 54 University Avenue, for nearly 6 months with all of her most intimate colleagues, all of whom had been imprisoned under house arrest, along with her family. And I got to probe the heart and mind of what many people consider to be a female embodiment of a Buddhist-oriented Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and a Nelson Mandela, that she was touted at that time to be a radically chic, cool, intelligent, composed, satirical, comedic, funny, deferential, absolutely stunning of the human heart person, woman. And she had a temper. You didn't want to cross her and you just went, okay, you're aristocracy, you're smarter than me, you've been imprisoned, you're the daughter of the most famous human being in the country outside of the Buddha. Her father started the Burmese army. General Aung San as a young student. Okay, halfway through. How the hell did Burma become so befuddled and muddled with this and that, and how come she's imprisoned? How come the international media, the BBC, the CNN, and the Washington Post, and all these famous journalists are vilifying her for not speaking up for human rights among the Rohingyas and other people? What's wrong with the bitch? How come she's failed the mission of her Nobel Peace Prize? She's fallen from grace, the great byline, right? I'll get into that. I think it's important for all of us to remember, at least it is for me, in talking about Burma, I don't think it's not important to mention that we're on the land of the First Nations. Correct? Yeah. British Columbia, that rings a bell somewhere, doesn't it? Burma, British Burma, 124 years of radical, violent, misogynistic, imperialistic, oppressive, white colonialism called systematic mass executions, if you defied, exported rice from the people where there was mass starvation. The prisons in Burma, ironically, all built by the British. And welcome to Big Brother, right? Where does that word come from? George Orwell, his little bit of his pseudonym for his hidden name as part of the tyranny posse, right? He was in Burma as a policeman. Yeah. He wrote Burma Days, the birth of 1984, where? From his own, hi, I'm a Brit oppressing the Burmese for 3 wars in 124 years. People talk about the Rohingya crisis in the Rakhine state near the Bay of Bengal, adjacent to India. 1824, the first Anglo-Burman war, when Winston Churchill's father, who was the Governor General of India, decided to gift the Queen Burma. And so they attacked from, at that point, India, which prior to Bangladesh and prior to East Pakistan, right? They went into Burma, and the Rakhine state, where the Rohingya crisis is, they annexed that particular region at the end of that 4-year war with massacre after massacre. And that became part of British India. The Rohingyas were forced laborers out of that region to build bridges and dams for the British. Okay, I'm not trying to condemn the British any more than they're willing to be condemned in denial of how they should be condemned. You know, but I'm not part of the club of, there is no first cause to what the Buddha talked about in the First Noble Truth. He talked about suffering is intrinsic to the fabric of universal context called samsara. One of the most fascinating concepts ever devised, I think, on earth is to provide a context where totality is understood by the law of Dhamma or Dharma. It's the ultimate experiential physics. And so there is no first cause of who did what to whom. People who don't understand Buddhism or Aung San Suu Kyi don't understand she's not one for taking sides. She's a middle pather, which is another way of looking at the Buddha's teaching, especially in a country that has intersecting wars, violence, tyrannies, and genocides. My first book in 1989, blessed by a beautiful foreword by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, called what? Burma, the Next Killing Fields. After nearly 6 months of underground research in the country, witnessing firsthand the tyranny of Burma's Buddhist military, tyrannizing students and Christians and Buddhists. This is long before the Muslims took the brunt of it in the Rakhine state that had first been annexed and occupied viciously by the British. Okay? And then there's 3 other wars. World War II comes. The Japanese fascists come in and attack the country. Immediately, the Americans and the Brits want to confront this. Burma had no army. It started with these young students. Who started it? Aung San Suu Kyi's father at the age of 23. They went underground to Japan. They were trained in underground tactics. They defied the British rule and were labeled as terrorists, coming to the end. Nelson Mandela, labeled by a terrorist by the white apartheid machine. Gandhi, terrorist by the white apartheid machine. Martin Luther King, terrorist. The list goes on and on and on. Aung San Suu Kyi's vilification comes primarily by the white oppressor, a very typical psychological sociopathic criticism, vilification, witch hunt of the woman. Burma is the study of toxic patriarchy, radical misogyny, and denied toxic patriarchy and totalitarianism and colonialism. Burma is a classic example of the denial of global guilt, shame, and me as American, of unrelenting modern-day tyranny to Islamic nations. Iraq, 500,000 civilians, that's called people like you and I, massacred based on a lie. And you want to condemn Aung San Suu Kyi under the British rule for 124 years, thinking of nonviolence? And you've thrown her under the bus based on your shame and guilt? Scapegoating. You can't understand Burma without understanding the psychological impact of what's going on in global politics. Now that's a whole other topic. Taking it up to the frontier, the last couple of minutes, we'll open it up to a dialogue and questions. How in the hell did it get this way? I know Aung San Suu Kyi as well as I think anyone outside of her most intimate friends and family who primarily aren't alive today. I spent 6 months with her doing a book of conversations called The Voice of Hope that she titled Conversations with Aung San Suu Kyi. I've done 2 other books. I've interviewed every one of her closest collaborators and co-revolutionaries, many of who've suffered up to 20 to 21 years in solitary confinement. Aung San Suu Kyi, if she were here today, she would be one of us. You could ask her anything in the world and she'd be transparent about it. She would say so many things that are very compelling. It's unimaginable that this woman, along with a country of 54 million people with 134 different ethnicities, they call her, when she comes out, Ma Su, the mother of freedom, the mother of the people. And yet the white legacy media has thrown her under the bus and vilified her as, quote, I don't like to use curse words, but the bitch is complicit with ethnic cleansing. And it's the furthest thing from the truth. And here it is today, Burma has been thrown under the bus as a gift to Xi Jinping for his Belt and Road Initiative, for his oil. Burma is the Saudi Arabia in South Asia. Unlimited oil, unlimited gas, and the other thing which often goes unaddressed is unlimited slave labor. Vietnam, China, Laos, people brought up those countries. Almost everything that you see in the city on the level of climbing and biking and tenting and kayaking and is all made in Vietnam by people who are making $1 an hour. You go to Zara clothing and you go, how can this piece of silk be made for $34 retail? Because of slave labor. Burma has been sold. Burma is the next Tibet. I've been saying this for 7 years. And it's because the military, just like my country today, with the so-called cliche of the global deep state elite, they're primarily men who are driven by profit, privilege, power, and I would call radical denial. And none of these men in power have ever been up close to the use of what ordnance or weapons. I've been in war zones. I haven't been up close on a sustained basis more than a couple of months at a time. I was in the last year of Yugoslavia's genocide, but I was always somewhat protected from the front lines. But in Burma, I was close. Been under rocket attack and frontline fire. It's not pretty. The smell of death is not something you get used to. These men in power, especially in Burma, they don't know what death looks like up close. President Biden doesn't know what a missile or a drone in Gaza looks like. These people would not, they will run and cower and poo in their pants if they were there. Burma has been sold to the highest bidder. It's a weapons industry. It's a cash cow. They've got pearls and rubies, oil, teak, sapphires, shellfish, and most of all, unlimited boys and girls who only learn to live with trauma. 124 years of British domination. Speak up and you will be killed. And so Burma is plastics, cars, clothing, garments. And the leader there, the dictator, just like Saddam Hussein, the best control of Burma is a dictator for the selling of the people and the commodities. It's an economic gig. Sorry to be so cut and dry about it, and Aung San Suu Kyi was in the way of that. And so they orchestrated, quite skillfully, a collective trap for her and her government. And I could talk a lot more about this. You know, she's the last thing in the world she is xenophobic or a racist. Her best friend was a lawyer who was from Rakhine, who was Muslim, who, when I was there, was assassinated in full daylight with his grandson in his arms at the airport. It's like, what are you thinking, Western legacy media? And they threw Burma under the bus. The Dalai Lama said many, many years ago, which touched my heart, if we don't do something for Tibet today, there'll be no Tibet to save in 10 years. That was in 1980. Burma might have a couple of minutes left. And this is why tonight we're inaugurating a global campaign, and I promise to end here, called useyourfreedom.org. And we're starting over again. We're calling for the immediate release of the unlawfully imprisoned democratic leaders in Burma's gulags, starting with the elected state councilor and Nobel Peace Laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, the president, Win Myint, 165 other elected democratic leaders imprisoned today, along with 19,200 additional prisoners of conscience, and no one is saying anything about them. The people said enough. Gen X said enough. We're going to take up weapons. And so it's a mutual kill. Meanwhile, imagine all of the elected officials in Ottawa imprisoned. Not a bad idea. In America, send them down to, Guantanamo. Joking. Despite all of our faults, we're hanging out, we're talking, we can use our voice, right? We can use our speech. There might be some problems ahead that we're faced with, but we're still in solidarity with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In Burma, those democratic elected leaders have been forgotten and vilified along with Aung San Suu Kyi, and they had a monumental task. 200 years of tyranny and trauma, 6 successive dictatorships that were more violent than the one before it. Ongoing ethnic cleansings of the Christians. I reported on it. The Karens, I was there, Burma, the next killing fields. They live on tyranny. And so right now we're going to make a massive global statement to rise up and to go to the useyourfreedom.org website, and you'll see just the beginnings and what you can do in our latest book called Aung San Suu Kyi from Prison. We're offering for free so that everything that I'm saying tonight, you can see it and read it and validate it. The last point I want to make is that the most notable statesman in UK, Sir Derek Tompkin, the former ambassador to Laos and Thailand, read the book. And he was blown away. He said, we transcribed 500,000 words of Aung San Suu Kyi from the time she was released in 2010 up until the time she was more recently incarcerated. And every criticism that in the media we could find, we labeled it by the journalist, the date, and the media source, and we put her words directly in response to the criticism. And every criticism that's ever been made about her, she in fact not only refutes, but often laughs about. They say I've been silent about the Rohingya crisis, and how many times do I need to speak out about it? They don't report it, and what they want to hear, they don't want to hear what I'm saying about it. And so they say I'm silent about it. When did she say that? There's so many places in our book that you can see that. And so she's a peacemaker. The Dalai Lama is a peacemaker. Aung San Suu Kyi, let it be known, whoever criticizes her, you got it wrong. Okay? You got it wrong. You can identify with being a woman, but you're a guy. Okay? I believe in free choice, but it doesn't make you a biological woman. Aung San Suu Kyi is a nonviolent, peaceful, revolutionary activist. She's not xenophobic and Islamophobic. I know her very well. And so please turn back that vilification story read our book online, Aung San Suu Kyi from Prison, join the campaign, and give peace a chance. It's the only place in the world that I can see that a woman has taken global leadership in saying to you guys, no, killing is not the way to freedom, justice, rule of law, and peace. Mr. Netanyahu, Hamas, Mr. Zelensky, Mr. Putin, Mr. Xi Jinping, Mr. Biden, enough killing. Killing is dead. That's Aung San Suu Kyi. So that's my message. And so thank you for listening. You can see that it's very passionate for me, but I'm hoping to speak for the people who can't speak for themselves, 20,000 prisoners of conscience. And we hope to release them so that they can speak for themselves and address the calamity in Burma. And let's hear what they have to say about the resolution. And just one little thing that must be said is that her advisor and teacher, her meditation teacher, is a man, little known man, named the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw, appointed as his successor, U Pandita. He did a book of conversations with me called The Wisdom for the World that he titled The Requisites of Reconciliation. He is the one who architected Burma's nonviolent struggle. No one knows Martin Luther King's teacher. No one knows Nelson Mandela's spiritual teacher. No one knows Gandhi's spiritual teacher. Some do, who are scholars. We know Aung San Suu Kyi's spiritual teacher, Sayadaw U Pandita. The book called Wisdom for the World, The Requisites of Reconciliation, should be given to every United Nations ambassador and leader in the world. It outlines what Aung San Suu Kyi was doing since she was released in 2010, based upon her guidance, her advisor, her teacher's role in what we call revolutionary reconciliation. And men don't get that. Primarily, not just men, but men like to fight it out. And she's saying, listen, stop. We've got to talk about it. There's no future of peace without dialogue. And that is so revolutionary for some strange reason. And that's Burma today, and that's Aung San Suu Kyi. And she's not alone. She's with about 1,000 other men and women who are around her. It's an ecosystem of reconciliation. And they're in our books, Burma's Voices of Freedom. Read them. So I leave it to all of you to go where you want or talk about anything. And I'm here to be any part of whatever you want to share and share whatever I know that might be valuable to you.